He Zhen felt that he was in the universe, surrounded by an endless starry sky. Not far from him, there was a huge white sphere with extremely dim light. This is where? Am I dreaming? He Zhen looked at the surrounding environment, thinking strangely. This is a gap in time and space. According to human understanding, you are now dead. Not far away, the dim light emitted by the big white ball undulated, and a strange wave radiated from the sphere to the surroundings. He Zhen heard such a sentence. He Zhen looked at the big white ball in surprise, and asked subconsciously, "Is you talking? What do I mean when I am dead?" And he really didn't finish speaking, and stopped abruptly. He didn't hear his own voice, he only felt strange waves of whole body. Fluctuation? He Zhen lowered his head and wanted to look at his body just a glance, and almost shouted out in surprise, if he could still make a sound. No arms, no torso, in fact, nothing. He is really looking at him with a peculiar, third-party gaze. Now he is just a small ball of light, dim and faint. Aren't you eager to cross? I have fulfilled your wish, are you ready to enter the new world? The big white ball sent out another wave. Passing through, wish. He Zhen was slightly taken aback. He remembered that he had just finished reading a super good-looking novel called The Hunter of the Lord. He was full of passion and yearning for it. Before going to bed, he was still thinking if he could also travel through it again. Enough. At the moment, this is not a bad thing. If you don't have the desire to cross, you will really have nothing if you die. As for crossing itself? Fortunately, he reads a lot of novels, and this kind of thing is within his psychological tolerance. But why did I die? He Zhen asked with some surprise. He remembered that he went to bed after reading the novel. He usually didn't stay up late, smoked or drink, and was quite healthy. Why did he die in his sleep? Could it be that your home is on fire? Or did a meteorite plane fall down? The big white ball was silent for a moment before it continued to emit new fluctuations and replied, because your physical body has great shortcomings, the material and energy exchange efficiency between the body and the external environment is too low, and the energy produced is too weak to reach the lowest standard for going to the gap of time and space, and my current energy is also it's not enough to transform your living cells. In order to satisfy your wishes, I can only stop all the cells in your body from metabolism, in order to achieve the purpose of separating the body and consciousness, and finally succeed in making your consciousness, or soul came here. If He Zhen still has an expression now, he must be dumbfounded. This long paragraph is quite complicated at first. He was shocked before reacting and let out an angry roar, "You mean, you want to make me crossing and killed me? Did you know that I only confessed yesterday? Now there is no time to explain. I want to send you to a new world. You must complete the task that belongs to you. You can refuse or fail, but the price is that the soul will be trapped here until it dissipates. For better help after you complete the task, I will awaken the most suitable ability for you. In the end, if you do well enough, resurrection is just a trivial matter. Now, go." The dim big white ball shines brightly, and even reminds people of returning to light. The strong soul fluctuations hit like a, interrupting and drowning He Zhen's roar. With the strong fluctuations like the stormy waves, He Zhen feels that his little ball of light is like a small flame swaying in the wind and rain, which will go out at any time, and his consciousness will become more and more blurred until the end. The main quest Supreme God Treasure has been released, recover the treasure of Wulin Supreme. After completing this task, you can leave the world. There is no time limit for the task. The side mission Anti-Kongfui has been released, to overthrow the rule of the Dechong dynasty and bring the world's history back on track. Completing this mission will receive special awards. Failure is without punishment, and the mission has no time limit. A peculiar wave of fluctuations sounded from the bottom of He Zhen's heart, awakening it. "Does this begin, asshole? My head feels dizzy, like I have slept for a few years." He Zhen's first impression of waking up was that he felt a terrible headache. At the same time, there seemed to be some strange memories in his mind. These memories are infused by the big white ball. The extra memories are shown in this way. In addition, there is also the background about this new world. According to the memory content, He Zhen has now come to a world similar to the background of ancient Chinese feudal society. The reason why he is said to be similar is that there are Jianghu and Wulin in this world. In this world, it is not a fairy tale, but a real skill. Strictly speaking, this world should be called the world of martial arts. Very well, so to speak, I have a chance to become a peerless swordsman. By the way, what other subtasks are there? But since there is no time limit for this task, can I just ignore it, just here? The world is happily playing for a lifetime? With the multi-travel novels I have read, eating and drinking spicy food, 3,000 harems and so on are not unfulfilled wishes. He Zhen opened his eyes and looked at the surrounding environment, while some chicken thieves thought. Speaking of it, He Zhen is also a rather heartless who is good at accepting reality. Since that big white ball is indeed an extremely supernatural existence that can kill him from the bed and make him soul through, then He Zhen had no way to resist except obediently obeying his mercy. And what the big white ball said is correct. In fact, he really wants to travel. If there is no task, it would be better. Of course, if there is a task, it is also the same. Recycling Wulin Supreme Treasure? It sounds like it's not easy. As for the spur, it's just for people to rebel. It's the safest thing not to touch it. He Zhen murmured. Dabakiu did not come with relevant mission intelligence, so he didn't know what Wulin Supreme Treasure was, but according to the routines in the novels and TV series I had read before, I was afraid it was either the dragon sword or the heavenly sword. It's like that. Once again, it's a secret book of peerless magic. You must break your head if you want to grab this kind of thing. The risk is too great, it's unnecessary. Since this quest shows that there is no unfinished punishment for the previous one, and there is no deadline for completion of the second, then you can treat it as if this quest does not exist. When He Zhen thought of this, his brain suddenly became active. Besides, although this is a martial arts world with an ancient feudal background, living conditions are certainly not as good as modern ones, but with the mind and foresight of his own traveler, he made some small inventions and became a man. Isn't it a matter of the richest man to make friends with a few peerless masters and learn top martial arts? The most important thing is that in ancient times, you could have 3 wives and 6 concubines. If you work hard to make more money, it is normal to marry 180 hers. Thinking of this, He Zhen couldn't help getting more excited, but then he felt that things were not quite right. It's not that his thoughts are wrong, but that the environment he is in is not right now. He now seems to be lying on a large wooden plank full of mottled and water stains. There is a large green in front of him. It seems to be something like curtains. To make matters worse, he wants to lift himself up. His hand, but found that there is no sensation in his body. In addition to thinking and vision, the only thing left seems to be hearing. He can hear the noisy communication of many people outside. Did I cross into a person who was completely paralyzed? Thinking of this, He Zhen couldn't help but feel a panic in his heart. If you are really paralyzed as soon as you cross, no matter what the task, you don't need to think about the 3 wives, 6 concubines, and the 6 houses. It's not good to live for a few days. It's better to die. As He Zhen wanted to figure out, his thoughts became stronger and stronger. The perspective in front of him suddenly changed, yes, from a first-person perspective to a third-person perspective that resembled a bird's eye view, just like seeing before. He became like a little ball of light. This is a little messy shack, about less than 10 square meters of space, empty, full of mess and firewood. There is a stove built in the house, a pot is burning on the fire. Look, it's a kitchen. Next to the pot, there is a brown-yellow wooden cutting board with some water stains on the cutting board. On it is an old black kitchen knife and a few green vegetables. He Zhen's eyes finally fell on the broken chopper. his heart tightened for a while, only feeling dry and mouth widening if he could still have a mouth. I will go to your uncle's big white ball. Why did Lao Tzu become a kitchen knife, and how does Lao Tzu complete the task for you? He Zhen shouted hoarsely from the bottom of his heart, trying to make the big white ball that murdered him and threw him into the mission world to respond. However, a few minutes passed, nothing changed, and no response appeared. In short, whether he accepts it or not, it's an ironclad fact to cross into a chopper lying on a chopping board with no mobility at all. Hey, when others are crossing, you can walk around and see the scenery of another world if you don't have any money. I have become a chopper and I still play with woolen yarn. Just wait for death. He Zhen finally gave up the inner cry, retracted from the first-person perspective, and returned to the body of the kitchen knife to lie down honestly. Now he is basically a ghost that lives on a kitchen knife. He can only observe things from the first-person perspective. If necessary, he can also be briefly cut into the third-person perspective, but this form can only be observed. The area of about 10 square meters with the kitchen knife as the center, and it has been maintained for a short time. It will make him feel headache in a few seconds, and he has to retract into the kitchen knife. Wait, the big white ball doesn't mean that it will give me a ability? This is a golden finger. I don't know if I can save it. Was previously shocked by the fact that he was found to have crossed into a tattered chopper, but it made He Zhen forget this important thing. As for how to turn on this ability for free? It's very simple. There is a relevant explanation in the memory of how the big white ball is inserted into the memory, just need to say silently in the bottom of my heart. My soul power. He Zhen called out softly in his heart with some uncertainty. I saw a translucent, full of inferior sci-fi online game style attribute panel instantly popped out, hanging in front of He Zhen's eyes. Name, He Zhen. Category, kitchen knife. Quality, garbage material, poor quality pig iron, pine wood holder, Li Gaodan. Reputation, indifferent 0%. Durability, 4/7 hardness, vulnerable resilience, vulnerable sharpness, unbearable soul ability, floating life-like sending mastering skills, insight into people's hearts. Feature, soul eater. After killing a living target, there is a 1% chance of absorbing the soul of the target. This feature has a bottom protection mechanism. When 99 consecutive kills fail to absorb the soul of the target, the next kill will have 100% probability of absorption. The current success rate of soul absorption, 100%. Resume of the God Soldier. Bah, you don't get along with the God Soldier at all, just a broken kitchen knife that has been aged and has some rust. He Zhen glanced through the attribute panel. As a broken kitchen knife, it is normal to be described as vulnerable and unnamed. His gaze stopped in the soul ability column, and followed his gaze. Watching, some corresponding annotations directly surfaced in his mind. Damn, I will cross into a kitchen knife. It turns out that it is the pot of this soul ability floating Ruzi. He Zhen finished reading the corresponding notes. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com suddenly felt a little painful in his heart. Since it is a soul wearer, when it comes to another world, it will inevitably occupy a body as the carrying body of the soul, but who will occupy it? But it is a random event. But no matter what, it has to cross to the life body. And how really this ability is awesome. Whether it is life or not, he can go through it. To put it simply, this is a strengthening of the ability to descend, soul wear, and parasitism. For example, it can be like breaking the reproductive isolation, so that He Zhen can descend and wear the soul to all kinds of animals, plants, and even inorganic substances. Now He Zhen has crossed to a kitchen knife, which is the choice of random numbers. If you think optimistically, this is at least better than crossing a stone or a pair of underwear. According to the memory of the big white ball, this floating life like a post can effectively avoid many crossing dangers. Although it may have a very low lower limit, it may also bring a very high upper limit. For example, a nonsense thing, even if I evolve into the dragon slaying sword, with a cut of 999,999, I can't automatically kill people and recover the treasure. He Zhen cursed in a low voice, and then moved his gaze to the only skill insight into the heart on the master skill bar. This can also be regarded as free novice activation skills. Insight into the human heart, the longer you hold the person, the less secret there will be. After you have a complete insight into the other person, you can communicate with them in your heart. Can you communicate with you, soul? In other words, I am a chopper who has ideas and can communicate with people. He Zhen tasted this skill carefully, looked at the holder column, and fell into thought. The thief of the straight girl, open it, forget it, it's scattered, don't surround it. Outside the shed, there was a tumult of noise and squabbles. After a while, it finally calmed down. These guys broke a chair again, and I will fix it later. A black and slim-looking boy who was about 15 or 6 years old walked into the shed cursingly. Li Gaodan, there is also a stir-fried radish and mushroom soup not served, move faster. Another urge came from outside the door. Okay, right now. The boy called Li Gaodan hurriedly responded, walked to the stovetop, grabbed the kitchen knife, and started to cut the radishes. It's too late for one person, if I could hire someone to help. Li Gaodan neatly cut the radish into slices, cut the pot, and took out a handful of mushrooms from the basket on the side to clean it up, muttering to himself. But he knew it was impossible. Although their snack shop had a good business, it was because it drove on the side of Wuxian cars and horse. The ancient car and horse shops were quite modern passenger transportation centers. Rangers and chariot drivers make up a huge flow of people. However, those who come to this simple food shop to eat are mostly those who drive the car, or the poor, and they don't make much money. The role of this small food shop is to maintain their own food and clothing. As for hire a personal help, that is impossible. It was his father Li Taizu who urged Li Gaodan outside just now. Daddy Li used to be a good handlebar style, but unfortunately, he was not lucky. Once, when the shocked horse overturned the car, his legs were crushed and he could only change his career. He took his son Li Gaodan on the side of the carriage. I opened a small food shop, and for a little bit, this small shop has been open for 5 or 6 years. Because Father Li had broken both legs, he could only sit all day long. The only job he could do was to collect money at the stall outside, shouting for the menu, and all other washing, chopping, cooking, and serving all had to be done by Li Gaodan. Completed independently. From time to time, I met some poppies running orders and fighting, and I had to go out in time to collect accounts or persuade him, such as just now. Ah, do you ask Li Gaodan? When Li Gaodan was 7 years old, his wife unfortunately got sick and passed away. In this family, Li Gaodan and Daddy Li are left alone. Dugan, bring another pot of rice wine, come now. Outside the door, Father Li's urging sound came again. Hey, right now. When Li Gaodan heard it, he had to put down the half-processed mushrooms, and then turn to drink in front of the wine jar. After so many years of working and making a living, Li Gaodan is also quite experienced. When doing things, he must deal with the urgent first, and then the important. For example, if the old man said that it is necessary now, it means that some guests have a bad temper, or the guests have a big shelf, and if they move slowly, something will happen, especially the guests who order wine, usually with handlebars. For fear of accidents, I dare not order wine in the daytime. Nowadays, most of the people who order wine are rangers and swordsmen. These people like to use hands and reckless accounts. Brother Dan, I'll take it for you. Just when Li Gaodan was too busy to score, a petite figure walked in. While talking, he skillfully picked up a pot of wine from Li Gaodan's hand without waiting for Li Gaodan. Thanks, he took it out lightly. In less than half a minute, the petite woman returned to the kitchen of the small shack, standing next to Li Gaodan, helping to choose the dishes. Junzi, don't you need to help me in the cart now? Li Gaodan glanced at the girl beside him, and asked softly. It's okay, now there is nothing wrong with this point. My father and my mother will come here busy, I think you need someone here. Junzi looks about the same age as Li Gaodan, her small face is a bit dark, but she can see the 3 to 4 points of beauty. She smiled at Li Gaodan, her hands kept busy. Junzi's family works in the carts and horses nearby. Genzi's father and younger brother are also handlebars. She and his mother mainly do things like cleaning, brushing horses, and feeding horses, as long as they are normal. In her free time, Junzi would always come over to help Li Gaodan. That's good. Li Gaodan nodded. By the way, Brother Dan, these days, there are people who rent horse-drawn carriages to go north. I heard those guest officials say that there are southern rebels coming towards our state capital, and the situation is very different this time. I heard the main rebel forces are already approaching Xiancheng. I only hope that it will not affect our Wu County. You should be more careful in weekdays. Junzi thought for a while, then said with some worry. Hey, have you not fought for a few years? Anyway, I am used to it. For so many years, I haven't seen those southern barbarians conquer Xiancheng. Besides, Xiancheng is still nearly 100 miles away from us. Li Gaodan smiled open-mindedly, not taking it seriously. For example, it is nearly 1 jiazi, 60 years, in Xia Difen today. With the Tianmo Along River as the boundary, the north is the Great Chong Dynasty, and the world calls it the Northern Dynasty. The continuation is the original 400 years of orthodoxy. In Li Gaodan's eyes, this is the true court of the emperor. As for the south of Along River, a group of chaotic officials and thieves took advantage of the chaos and failed to steal the country many years ago, and finally set aside the river to rule the newly established Daxing dynasty, which the world calls the Southern Dynasty. The Southern and Northern dynasties continued to attack each other. The two sides fought each other year after year, and the number of dead and wounded soldiers and civilians was unknown. However, after decades of fighting, it seems that it is about to end. The Chong dynasty in the north is the world's orthodox after all. Xiang has been regaining his homeland every year, and now he has recovered 70% to 80% of his homeland. As for the Daxing in the south, if it weren't for the Along River every year, it would have been completely wiped out by the army of the northern dynasties, if it weren't for the Along River. Not long after the southern dynasties, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Therefore, even the flathead people like Li Gaodan, who are not too far from the border, are not concerned about the war. The girl next to Li Gaodan responded softly, without saying more, just busy in the small shack, responding to Father Li's call outside from time to time, and promptly brought out the wine and food. Maybe at the end of this year, I should go to propose marriage with Junzi's parents. Then Junzi can help in the shop while making some female celebrities to sell, and then life will be much better. When the two of them were busy, Li Gaodan glanced at the dark-skinned girl next to him secretly, thinking with some happiness in his heart the two are similar in age, and the two families are also considered familiar and paired with each other, plus the two they are also childhood sweethearts who have grown up together since childhood. These conditions are combined, but it is quite rare. Yes, although life is poor and busy, but with the girl around him, Li Gaodan only feels that he is full of hope for the future life, and his heart is also full of happiness. The days passed quickly, and more than a month passed. On this day, Li Gaodan was working at the snack shop as usual. He was cutting vegetables. Suddenly he heard a careful sound in his ear. The voice was a little old, as if it were said by an old man, but at the same time, the voice was clear and like speaking in general against his ear. He was immediately startled. What? Li Gaodan suddenly stopped and looked around, only to find that he was the only one in the small hut, and there was no old man talking to his ear. Did I misheard it? After standing there for a while, Li Gaodan shook his head and raised the kitchen knife again to prepare to cut vegetables, but at this moment, there was a burst of unusual noise outside. Go away, go away! Get out of your way if you don't want to die. Binjai, don't. There seemed to be a lot of people pouring into the stall outside, all kinds of fierce yelling and cursing one after another, among them the shouts of Old Man Li. What's wrong? Li Guda threw down the kitchen knife abruptly, rushed out of the small shed, saw the scene on the stall, couldn't help being stunned. Sure enough, I can hear my voice, and it also supports the voice-changing function, which is a very important ability. On the stove of the small shack, the kitchen knife was lying quietly on the cutting board. He Zhen shrank in it, thinking about the effect of trying to communicate with the holder for the first time. In fact, 10 days ago, which is almost the 5th and 6th day of the journey, He Zhen had already fully understood the entire life of the kitchen knife owner Li Gaodan so far. That's right, the skill description of insight into people's hearts. The longer you hold you, the less secrets you have to speak of is quite appropriate. As long as Li Gaodan holds the kitchen knife, the He Zhen attribute panel will appear as a Insight Analysis progress bar. This progress bar starts from 0% and slowly rises with the holding time. As the Insight Analysis progress bar slowly rises, Li Gaodan's life memory has been gradually understood and mastered by He Zhen from birth and growth. When the Insight Analysis progress bar reaches 100%, when Li Gaodan touches the kitchen knife, He Zhen will pop up a Li Gaodan real-time information panel, which simply records some of Li Gaodan's information. The situation is like this: kitchen knife holder, name, Li Gaodan reputation, indifferent, 0/1000, skill, none. Comprehensive evaluation, the two wastes combined, you are a perfect match. At the same time, He Zhen has also completely mastered Li Gaodan's life trajectory from end to end, and it can even be said that he knows Li Gaodan better than Li Gaodan himself. At least Li Gaodan certainly can't remember the scene when he was born, but these things, in front of He Zhen, are like a movie, which can be read and understood frame by frame. But because of this, He Zhen reached a 100% resolution of Li Gaodan 10 days ago, but he did not try to communicate with him for the first time after he turned on the spiritual communication ability. Because He Zhen has to make sure that he can grasp this opportunity, he has to think clearly about all the possible reactions Li Gaodan may have, especially how to make him accept his existence and how to control him. Unfortunately, crossing into a kitchen knife, so that He Zhen must be careful with every next step and every decision he makes, squandering hard-won opportunities at will only make himself forever. Why not want to frighten Li Go rashly egg, finally let himself lie down in some nameless little gutter for a lifetime? This kind of possibility is very big. After all, He Zhen now knows Li Gaodan better than everyone else, and he knows exactly what color Li Gaodan wears the first crotch pants in his life. By the way, what is the side mission, that is, anti-Kongfui, overthrow the rule of the Chang dynasty and bring the history of this world back to the right track? When I first awoke, why didn't I know this? What was going on? But after understanding Li Gaodan's life memory, he figured out the situation. It turned out that the history of this world that was stuffed in his mind by a big white ball is completely contrary to the actual historical development experienced by Li Gaodan. The real history of this world, which Li Gaodan knows, is that De Chang of the Southern Dynasty and Daxing of the Northern Dynasty were ruled by the river. The world has been divided for a long time, but the history of the Great White Ball into He Zhen's memory is a complete one. A dynasty that dominates the world. And this dynasty is not called De Chang or Daxing, but De Yi. According to the correct history in He Zhen's mind, the decadent and backward De Chang dynasty should have been overthrown 60 years ago, and the newly born Dai Yi dynasty will sweep De Chang like a ruin and rebuild a peace and prosperity. But He Zhen didn't know what happened 60 years ago, which turned history completely in an inexplicable direction. The information given by the big white ball in his mind only had the general trend, and he did not detail one person in the family. Specific events. In short, now He Zhen probably understands the meaning of the second task, anti-Kongfui. Not only is to redominate the world, but also to make the new dynasty neither De Chang nor De Xing, but a De Yi that has never existed in this world. This task is more cheating than joining the Kuajun in 49 years, and this Li Gaodan is not very easy to control. He Zhen from the kitchen knife side. In fact, it seems that he has no control over Li Gaodan at all. According to the analysis of Li Gaodan's life trajectory, although Li Gaodan is still only a 16-year-old boy, as the saying goes, poor people's children headed home early, and the ancient 16-year-old man could already have a family and business. Li Gaodan's psychological age is definitely about the same as that of an adult. It is unlikely that he will be easily frightened by a talking chopper. Even if he is frightened for a while, he will react sooner or later. This is really self-aware. If he wants to impersonate a ghost, scare and control Li Gaodan, he must be able to show a strong enough miracle that can shock the other party, and it is best to have a certain damage ability or counter-control ability, but now he obviously doesn't have the means in this regard. Secondly, from the perspective of ability, let alone settling the chaos to the general trend of history, just say that the task that must be completed is recovering the supreme treasure of martial arts. How can a country-wild child who does not know martial arts intervene in such a secret treasure? Taking a step back, why should Li Gaodan give up his father, fiancé, and hope for a better life in the future, and help a weird kitchen knife risk life and death? You know, Li Gaodan is just a simple and timid feudal society peasant with no dreams and little knowledge, not an ambitious, read countless books of travel through novels, yelling all day, clear without rebellion, chrysanthemum said electric drill modern angry youth. Judging from the trajectory of Li Gaodan's past behavior, if He Zhen rashly starts to scare Li Gaodan will only throw this weird kitchen knife into the gutter, or bury it deeply. Then, He Zhen will really be asking every day to refrain, the ground is not working. Therefore, He Zhen has been suppressing his impulse to persuade and influence Li Gaodan. He has to change his mind to manipulate and control Li Gaodan. However, this requires some opportunities. Fortunately, there seems to be an opportunity right now. Is coming? In front of Li Gaodan's eyes, a small thatched stall that could only cover 4 or 5 square tables was now full of people, all soldiers wearing red Dechong dynasty uniforms. Some of these soldiers had hands. There was still a dazzling weapon in it, and they were viciously expelling the dining guests, grabbing tables and chairs, and some even threw directly on the table, grabbed the steamed buns and stuffed them into their mouths. It is different from the soldiers of the Dechong dynasty that He Zhen has seen in the past. These soldiers are all tired and frightened. They are very dusty, and even some of them are stained with blood. Yu.ukansha.com There was a frantic aura of embarrassment on the whole. Hurry up and eat it, what can I serve? I'm going to be exhausted, bring some water up. The soldiers who squeezed into the stall later were shouting loudly. As for the guests who ate at the stall earlier, they were scared away or driven away. Even many chairs were thrown out. At first, the old man tried to yell at people. After all, he hadn't paid for the food yet, but he was already shocked at the moment. He was just shouting stupidly, "Master, don't go and get some food for Lao Tzu, or you will be killed." A soldier saw Li Gaodan wearing an apron, and he saw that he was the man in the stall. He directly pulled his collar by the collar and shouted viciously while holding a knife. Under the sharp blade, Li Gaodan finally woke up, and quickly responded loudly, "The little one will go and get the soldiers, and the soldiers will sit first. Don't hurt my father and the things in the shop." Li Gaodan broke away from the opponent's palm, turned around and ran to the small shed to find food. At the same time, he was scared as if there was a big drum beating constantly. This chew-bapping is unreasonable, and now it is even more so. It looks like a starving ghost reborn. If you don't hurry up, I'm afraid that my small stall will be thrown away. What happened? What happened? Li Gaodan was scared, and this question couldn't help but pop up in his heart. Sure enough, it was true that the front line was really defeated, and De Kongwo's army was defeated in the rear, but I still don't know how big the subsequent impact will be. He Zhen, the soul of the kitchen knife, watched Li Gaodan stumble and panic, rushing into the small shed and start to get busy again, thinking silently in his heart. Xiancheng was captured. Li Gaodan just sent out a dish of braised beef, and asked his dad in despair. The worry Juanzi raised to him more than a month ago has finally turned into reality today. There were more and more broken soldiers coming outside Wuxian County. Just listening to the conversations of these soldiers, Li Gaodan finally understood what had happened. The rebels of the southern dynasties, almost on the verge of extinction, launched a counterattack and achieved amazing results. Those who came to Wuxian embarrassedly were all defeated soldiers who escaped after the front line Xiancheng was breached. I heard that this time the southern dynasty sent all the elite troops out, not only breaking through the encirclement of Dachang, but also fighting against Xian. The city, even invited a demon from an unknown deep mountain, caused a thunder and earth fire to collapse half of the city wall, and finally took the strong fortress that had stood by the Along River in the sky for decades in one fell swoop. Don't worry about the undefeated, how much food is left in the shed. And keep the account. Is different from Li Gaodan's concerns. Father Li is even more nervous about the small stalls he depends on for his livelihood. Now these Kyubai are quite top-notch, and those who are not given food will definitely not work, but they can't be eaten for nothing. The drinks and meat and vegetables are gone, and there are still some vegetables, and the account is kept. It's almost 8 cents and 6 cents, but... When he was reminded by Father Li, Li Gaodan also hurriedly calculated, his face became more dignified. Not remembering the account is one thing, it's another thing with whom to ask for the account. Now it's the point, it is really not easy to ask for money from those Chuba. I know about the money, you go get some food, please comfort these people, don't break the rest of the tables and chairs. Papa Li whispered to Li Gaodan. Good. Li Gaodan nodded, then turned around and walked back to the small shed, but there was always a trace of confusion on his face. But, how can you lose? In the information and government propaganda received by Li Gaodan, it is that a million army has encircled the southern dynasty into a railroad. The front line is a strong and solid city, winning undefeated, and it seems that Dachang's regaining of the south is just around the corner. But the defeated soldiers I saw today completely went beyond Li Gaodan's imagination. Oh, although the turmoil is not a good thing for the people at the bottom, but it is my opportunity to be defeated. This snack shop, which has no anti-risk ability at all, will close down in all likelihood. At this time, I will show up, I can't help but he doesn't rely on me. The kitchen knife He Zhen sliced the vegetables quickly in Li Gaodan's hands, but in his heart he was thinking about the next move. Since direct threats and intimidation methods may not be able to control Li Gaodan, how true is it to use inducing and appearing as external grandfather, step by step to let the other party rely on himself, and finally make the other party obey his own command? Choose a plan. He reminded Li Gaodan to be careful. First, he wanted to make a good relationship with the other party first, and second, he wanted to build his image of prophecy. As for his ability to know the arrival of the rebellion in advance, there is nothing commendable since he became the soul of the kitchen knife. He has no ability to move, the only thing he has is sight and hearing. Moreover, his two perception abilities have also been greatly improved. In terms of vision, when he enters the third-party perspective, everything in the surrounding area of more than 10 square meters is clearly visible and observable even if it is messy. In terms of hearing, it is almost like a small radar. Within a few tens of meters, not to mention normal conversation speech, even the incitement of mosquito wings can be clearly captured. Bored on weekdays, the soul of the kitchen knife can only listen to the conversations of merchants near the carts and horses as if listening to the radio. Naturally, he can clearly know that there has been another war between the northern and southern dynasties, and this time the southern dynasties turned against the northern dynasties. After a wave, when Suanken's defeated soldiers entered the surrounding area of Wu County, He Zhen's super-strong radar-level hearing also allowed He Zhen to know the situation first, and finally there was the scene of reminding Li Gaodan in advance. Cut off this cabbage, there is nothing left. Li Gaodan hesitated to press the last Chinese cabbage on the cutting board, hesitating whether to cut it off. This cabbage and a few coarse grain wata were the last food in the entire kitchen, and he prepared it for himself and his father. Dinner. But he hasn't brought anything out for a while, and the soldiers outside are clamoring fiercely, saying that they don't believe it if they don't have food. Just when Li Gaodan was hesitant, the old man, he thought it was an illusion, once again abruptly sounded in his ears, "Get ready to run." Li Gaodan was taken aback again, holding a kitchen knife and looking around, he shouted, "Who is it?" This time, he is sure that he is not hallucinating, the voice is so realistic. But there is no one around. A sense of absurdity with some fear suddenly rose in Li Gaodan's heart. Run fast, life matters. Just as Li Gaodan was engrossed in his observation, the old voice still sounded strangely in his ears, and Li Gaodan's expression suddenly changed. In addition to the fear of the unknown sound, he was also afraid of the warning content of this voice. Earlier, the old voice said "careful," and then a large number of broken soldiers appeared in the snack shop. Now, the old voice prompts "run and small life is important" one after another. What disaster does this mean? Could it be that outside? Thinking of this, Li Gaodan didn't bother to look for the source of the old voice anymore, and rushed out of the small shed while wearing an apron and carrying a kitchen knife. As soon as he rushed out of the small shack, Li Gaodan frowned. After a short period of time, it seems that the snack shop and the atmosphere outside have changed again. The soldiers who used to be clamoring about serving food and yelling in the food shop, reading www.yuyuganshu.com, are abnormally quiet now. Many people do not sit in places, but stand, looking suspiciously on their faces. The official road on the side looked at the south again. On the official road next to the stall, many soldiers who came afterwards didn't stop to rest at all. "The gate is closed" or something like that. "What's the matter, why are you running again?" A soldier in the snack shop shouted to his companions running on the official road. "You don't want to wait to die? Nanbanza is chasing you." A soldier shouted to the people who were still waiting in the snack shop. "Southern barbarian! Fuck you, are you chasing after you run so far? Advanced county!" The soldiers in the whole snack shop boiled in an instant, and they swarmed out directly along the official road towards the county. "Hey, Lord Bing, you can't leave if you haven't given the money yet." Papa Li, who was sitting in the shop, had quick eyesight and quick hands this time, and he grabbed a small team officer who seemed to be a 10 fighter and asked him to settle the money first. If it was only $1 or $2, Father Li would break his teeth and swallow it in his stomach. If he didn't want it, he wouldn't need it. But this group of soldiers ate everything from the snack shop, which was nearly $9. It's worth the cost of their father and son for 2 months, how can you say that you don't want it? If it is really no longer necessary, how will he and the dog eggs live next? How can this shop continue to open? The contract has been mailed out, and the status will be changed after the holiday. Brothers who have invested times can use free investment opportunities and earn a contract point. It's always right. "I don't have money for you now, let me go." The squad officer watched all the companions in the snack shop ran out, and was even more anxious, hitting Daddy Li's shoulder with a punch, trying to break free. "Help, there are officers and soldiers who don't pay for meals, they beat people." Is there any reason for heaven? Daddy Li received this punch, not only didn't let go, but he jumped up, hugged the team officer's thigh tightly, just not letting him go. "Old stuff, you are looking for death." The squad officer couldn't get rid of it for several consecutive times. He became more anxious, and finally couldn't hold it back. He drew the knife from his waist with one hand. "Daddy!" in Li Gaodan's exclaim, "I saw that the team officer's long knife ruthlessly penetrated into Father Li's back, and the tip of the knife came out through his chest, dripping a little bit of red." Witnessing all this, Li Gaodan's mind was blank at first, but he felt shocked and terrified, and then he felt a surge of blood on his head. The grief and anger in his heart swelled like a balloon and overflowed the entire rib cage. You killed my father, I fought with you. Li Gaodan stared at the squad officer, roared, and rushed over with a kitchen knife. Then I will fulfill you too. The squad officer didn't do anything, he said viciously, took the knife from old Li's body, turned around and slashed at the leaping Li Gaodan. Li Gaodan rushed halfway, the kitchen knife could be raised above his head, and the team officer moved so swiftly that he came first after the knife was released, and had already smashed Li Gaodan's face. Ah, I'm going to die, how can such a powerful officer and soldiers lost Xiancheng facing this fierce stab? Li Gaodan had such a thought flashing in his mind. He felt that he was too late to react, fearing that his entire head would be split in half. Li Gaodan closed his eyes in despair, it felt like a long time, but found that there was no blade falling on his forehead, but there was an old cry in his ear, "Don't be in a daze, get out of the way and give him a stab in the neck." At the same time, something more miraculous happened. Li Gaodan obviously closed his eyes, but the scene in the snack shop suddenly came into his mind. In the scene that appeared in his mind, the team officer who carried the knife towards him seemed to have fallen into the paste, his movements became quite slow, and the blade was still a foot away from his forehead. Li Gaodan was like a drowning man who had caught a life-saving straw. He subconsciously obeyed the command of the old voice, jumped to the side, avoided the blade, and then swung the kitchen knife in his hand and hit the man. The neck of the team officer. Then, the image in his mind disappeared. Li Gaodan felt a rush of heat on his face, and then opened his eyes in a panic, wiped the liquid on his face, and looked at the scene in front of him in surprise. He stepped back, hit the table, and let out an exclamation of awe. In front of him, the squad officer who killed his dad and wanted to kill him was lying on the ground, his face was full of disbelief and fear, his hands were firmly covering his neck, but the red blood still couldn't stop. Spilled from between the fingers. And the kitchen knife in Li Gaodan's hand and the hand he wiped his face are also full of blood. I did this. Li Gaodan instantly felt his dry mouth and tongue. He was not sure what he was feeling now. There was the grief of his father being killed, the fear of being almost killed, the panic of the first murder, and the joy of revenge. There are other indescribable feelings. It's very risky. I finally had a goal that could be resolved and communicated. I was almost killed. This guy was too impulsive. He Zhen, the soul of the kitchen knife, also took a long sigh. Although old Li would be killed was unexpected, it's nothing strange. People in troubled times are not as good as peace dogs. When the soldiers are anxious, it's not difficult to understand that the killer will be hurt, but Li Gaodan rushed forward desperately. The revenge frightened him. He didn't expect that this old-looking boy would react so much when he was stimulated. Although Li Gaodan doesn't care if he is dead, he can't help worrying about his fate. We have to analyze another goal and be able to communicate with it. At least more than 10 hours should be spent with him. What should I do if I was thrown into which a shading corner, or simply discarded? If you have tossed around a few hands, and finally fall into the hands of an old woman or housewife, the task will be hopeless. Therefore, in desperation, He Zhen had no choice but to do his best to help. He immediately entered the third-party perspective of the soul out of the body, and at the same time infused Li Gaodan with high observation images with the ability of spiritual communication. The crooked hit was able to trigger the bullet time, which saved Li Gaodan's life and killed the squad officer of the Dechang army. The kill target was detected, the soul eater has been triggered, and the soul is absorbed. Drip, the soul has been absorbed. At this moment, the soul of the kitchen knife heard two strange fluctuations in his mind. At the same time, a large number of new memories emerged. Accompanying it, there are various sweet and bitter in life. Happy. The memory of a man named Wang Sida who was born in a poor military family in Days County of the Dechang dynasty. He learned martial arts from his parents from his childhood. He was conscripted into the army as an adult, and then moved from Days County. I was dispatched to Xiancheng and stayed for more than 10 years. I participated in many wars with the southern dynasties. I also surrounded and suppressed bandits and martial artists who were banned by force. During this period, there were lives and deaths, battles and escapes. Over the years, I also made a few decisions. Bo Gong was finally promoted to a squad officer. Later, Xiancheng was attacked by the southern dynasties. He followed the defeated army and retreated towards Wuxian. In the end, He Zhen turned his gaze back to the squad officer whose neck was chopped off, and saw that this person had stopped opening his eyes and died with his eyes wide open. This person is the Wang Si. This is the soul eater of my Reishi sub-character. The so-called soul is the complete experience of a person's memory and life experience. Wait, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com, what am I, Kitchen Knife World Frostmourne. He Zhen is also a little surprised, but in general, it must be a good thing to be able to absorb the soul. As for things like multiple memories mixed together to make people schizophrenic described in some movies and novels, maybe it is the blessing of soul power, maybe that's the case when I become a chopper. Anyway, how can I feel that I am not abnormal? No matter, it is Li Gaodan's memory is still the soul of Wang's side just now. To him, it is like two unrelated movies or two books. Doesn't anyone have a nerve split after watching two movies or books? What to do, I killed the official. He Zhen frowned when he heard the muttering from around him. I saw that he had taken a few deep breaths in a row, and still felt that his heartbeat was extremely fast. Liashan Wazul Li Gaodan had not recovered his calmness. He was standing in place at the two corpses of his father and the team officer, bewildered, muttering to himself. He Zhen sighed, this kind of dogleg with no ambition and little knowledge is really not able to support the wall with mud. Even if he was rushing to his head and helped kill his father and enemy, now he started to worry about killing officials. The charge? It seems that even if he catches up with the conversation, there is still a long way to go to train this person to be able to complete the task. Cleared his throat slightly, and imitated He Zhen, who was an old voice in his heart. Using the ability of spiritual communication, he said to Li Gaodan, go find your Wanner, and then quickly enter the county town. By the way, you must take a good kitchen knife. He Zhen silently added another sentence. Go to your Wanner, and then fast forward to the county seat. You must hold a kitchen knife. The old voice rang in Li Gaodan's ear again. This time, Li Gaodan was not taken aback. At this time, when he was completely at a loss, even vaguely, he was extremely grateful for this voice in his heart, as if he had found the backbone. Although he feels a little puzzled about the must take a good kitchen knife, but now the situation is urgent, but he didn't think deeply about it after all. This is a weapon. Yes, there is Junzi. Liashan Wazul Li Gaodan glanced at his stabbed father again, vowing in his heart that he would return to bury the corpse later, and followed the instructions of the old voice, carrying a kitchen knife and rushing out of the snack shop. Wuxian carriage tour is only a few tens of meters away from Li's snack shop, and Li Gaodan can get there by turning around, but now, the entire official road is in chaos. Master Bing, you can't grab my car. No, Bing, you can do it. Help! Some officers and soldiers killed and robbed horses. A large area from the official road to the entrance of the carriages and horses, begging for mercy and screaming sounded. I saw a lot of soldiers flipping directly onto the carriage on the side of the road, kicking the carriage away, grabbing the carriage and leaving, and meeting some coachman who refused to let it go. The soldiers went up with a knife. As for the carriages and horses, now the main entrance is wide open, a mess, and a few soldiers are leading the horses in the stables. Where is Junzi? Why didn't you see Junzi? Li Gaodan anxiously ran toward that side, passing by these horse-grabbing soldiers, and ran into the carriage. The original bustling carts and horses are now empty. The horses in the yard and stables have been robbed by soldiers, and all kinds of sundries have been lost on the ground. Junzi, Uncle Zhang Junzi! Li Gaodan yelled in the empty carts and horses, but couldn't get a response. Impossible, Junzi will never run away without saying a word. Li Gaodan muttered to himself, a little unpleasant premonition emerged in his heart. After all, there are only a few steps away from the snack shop. If Junzi runs away, she will definitely come and call herself just like she wants to run away, she will definitely go to Junzi. Li Gaodan ran past rows of stables, yelling Junzi's name, and suddenly, he stopped. In the stables in the innermost row, there are several dead bodies lying crookedly on the ground. According to the costumes and hairstyles, you can tell at a glance that they are almost 2 men and 2 women. One of them is exactly. Li Gaodan felt that his eye sockets were suddenly blurred, and he staggered towards him and knelt down beside the corpses. Uncle Zhang, Sister Zhang, Brother Zhang, and Junzi. Li Gaodan's throat was vague, and he moaned in pain like a wounded beast. He felt like he was living in a nightmare today. Suddenly, his dependent father died. When he looked back, his childhood sweetheart Junzi was also dead, and even Junzi's parents and younger brothers were all dead. All the people who were a little closer around him disappeared. He Zhen, the soul of the kitchen knife, felt sorry for Li Gaodan for the first time. He foresaw the possibility of the defeat of the Dechang dynasty, and he also deeply understood the discipline and style of the feudal era. No matter which feudal dynasty, thieves pass like a comb, soldiers pass like a grate will not be outdated. Prosperity, people suffering, death, people suffering are the most true portrayal. He Zhen's original plan was to use the impact of the collapse of the soldiers on the small farmers at the bottom to help him and Li Gaodan to talk to each other, and to gain the trust of the other party. Now it seems that his plan has achieved unprecedented success. He can feel Li Gaodan's helplessness now, but for Li Gaodan, life may be too cruel. Run, unless you want to die here too. The old voice rang in He Zhen's ear. I don't want to live anymore. Li Gaodan knelt down beside Junzi, and said blankly. It doesn't matter who is talking in his ear, he doesn't care anymore. It doesn't matter if Daxing's soldiers are coming over. If you live alone, why not go underground to accompany your father and Junzi? Don't you want to avenge Junzi? Take revenge, can Junzi survive? Li Gaodan finally couldn't suppress it, and swallowed loudly in an explosive manner. He Zhen is on the kitchen knife, frowning silently. It seems that the stimulus he was expecting seems to be a bit overwhelming. The old man can do it. The old voice seemed to sound very surely. Li Gaodan's suffocation stopped for a while, and he asked a little uncertainly, what? The old man can make your father and your Junzi come alive. He Zhen said in an old but extremely affirmative tone. What? You said you can make my father and Junzi come alive. Li Gaodan trembled all over again with this mysterious voice to verify. You, what are you? The dying person doesn't need to know so much. The old voice answered coldly. I don't want to die anymore. Li Gaodan jumped up from the ground violently, with a tear on the back of his hand, holding a kitchen knife. He rushed out of the carts and horses frantically, ran to the official road, and ran towards the town of Wuxian County. Sure enough, hope will bring strength to people. He Zhen was on the kitchen knife and watched Li Gaodan's unprecedented desire to survive, and rushed madly on the official road. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com silently added in his heart, but I'm sorry, I lied to you. He Zhen is now trapped in a kitchen knife and can't move, and is expecting to rely on Li Gaodan to complete the task. Naturally, he cannot die easily. If he starts from the perspective of White Lie, he will at least save Li Go. The life of the egg. Thinking of this, He Zhen couldn't help but feel a little strange. Although he thought he was not an indecisive and sentimental person, he was by no means an extremely cold and unfeeling person. Before crossing, he even had a little dizziness. But today, he has witnessed several human tragedies, and there is no emotional fluctuation in his heart. When he speaks to deceive Li Gaodan, even if the main cause is to use Li Gaodan, the secondary cause is to save his life, but in the whole process, and did not produce any feelings of sympathy or pity, which is a bit strange. Is it because I crossed into the kitchen knife, so I am now a kitchen knife with no emotions? He Zhen can only guess like this. Although Li Gaodan's time wasting in the cart and horses was only a few minutes, it was not short when everyone fled frantically. Therefore, when Li Gaodan ran back to the official road towards Wuxian County, there are not many routes running wild. After all, watching the huge and thick gates of Wu County get closer and closer, the broken soldiers and people who ran ahead of Li Gaodan all cried and pleaded. Don't close the city gate, don't close it. Help! Brothers haven't come in yet, don't close it. I saw the gate of Wu County, unexpectedly slowly closing. Li Gaodan's eyes were about to split, and he pushed away the people in front of him like crazy, and rushed towards the county seat as hard as he could. Do not! Li Gaodan rushed all the way, but in the end he couldn't rush in before the city gate closed. Just a few steps away from Li Gaodan, the heavy gate of Wu County was closed tightly. Many other people who were kept outside, the soldiers broke down and burst into tears. Now as long as you look back, you can see the black-clad knights appearing one after another on the hillside not far away. Those are the chasing soldiers of the southern dynasty. At this moment, He Zhen, the soul of the kitchen knife, had to start thinking about what he should do after Li Gaodan died. To put it bluntly, he can only pray, hoping that the next person who picks up this kitchen knife can be more reliable. On the city wall of Wu County, the defenders also began to yell, and all kinds of equipment for defending the city began to be prepared. 10, 20, 30 black-armored knights appeared on the hillside more and more, and those who gathered at the gate of the city but could not enter the county were getting closer to collapse. Some even cried and tried to use the sword in their hands. Nail knocked open the heavy city gate. The number of southern black knights that finally appeared on the hillside was more than 30, no more. These black-armored knights looked towards Wu County for a while, and then turned their reins one after another and headed south. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes passed. There was no more black-armored cavalry on the hillside, and there was not even a single figure in the southern direction. Those are only scout rangers from the southern dynasty. The army has not come, let us enter the city. Finally, a recovering defeated soldier yelled to the city. The vision on the city wall is much better than that of the city. Naturally, it can be determined whether there is a large army in the distance. At this time, he finally ordered the opening of the gate of the county seat. Just some scout wanderers. Li Gaodan kept repeating in a low voice, and walked into Wu County desperately. The kitchen knife stained with blood was hidden in his robe, and his face was covered with blood. This is nothing, inside the city. There are many more embarrassing and terrifying outside the city now. He just never thought that he was so scared that thousands of soldiers went crazy, causing his father to die, and his Junzi and his family were also dead. It turned out to be just a little more than 30 Southern Dynasty scout wanderers. The soul of the kitchen knife He Zhen was also a bit dumb. According to the general impression of the squad officer Wang Side, although there were bad habits in feudal society such as eating empty salaries and drinking blood in the army of Dechang, this situation also existed in the Southern Dynasty. Moreover, generally speaking, the treatment of the soldiers of the Dechang dynasty is much better than that of the farmers at the bottom. In addition, the current Emperor Dechang is also considered to be diligent in governance, focusing on martial arts. The military is quite courageous, and the generals with high martial arts are not. Shea, how could you be so scared by the Southern Dynasty army? He Zhen subconsciously observed Wang Side's memory of the battle that Xiancheng was broken in his memory. This look made his expression serious. In memory, Wang Side guarded the north gate in Xiancheng, which was the place with the lowest fighting intensity. On the night of the city's destruction, only a thunderous explosion was heard, and the sky in the south of the city was red. The bricks and tiles of the house fell from the sky, and the panic caused by all this is undoubtedly. Then, countless Dechang soldiers fleeing in the direction of the north gate crying and crying. This is heaven thunder and earth fire. He Zhen carefully observed Wang Side's memory twice, and immediately thought of the reason for the destruction of Xiancheng mentioned in the conversation of the soldiers. The picture in the memory even reminds He Zhen of the shocking scenes of the arsenal explosion in the war movie, but this is a scene that should never exist in this martial arts world, so it is no wonder that the soldiers of the northern dynasties was frightened. Midnight. A dilapidated temple in Wuxian County. This kind of dilapidated and abandoned temple is always a hot spot for homeless people and beggars. Nowadays, it is tainted by the atmosphere of war and it is even more crowded. Li Gaodan is now nesting in a corner of a side hall where the air is leaking on all sides. The only home for him and his father is outside the city, not far from the snack shops and carts. Now he dare not go home today. It was only 30 Yu Qi, but who can guarantee that there will not be a large army to crush the territory tomorrow? Therefore can only stay in the ruined temple in this county seat. The closest to Li Gaodan is a middle-aged woman holding a child. She should also be a peasant woman who lives outside the county. She glanced at Li Gaodan, and she shrank to the other side with a little fear. There is no other reason. Li Gaodan's face was covered with blood stains on his hands, and he took out a blood-stained kitchen knife from his arms. He was talking divinely, like a lunatic. What? You? Are you the kitchen knife in my hand? Li Gaodan opened his eyes wide, holding the chopper in his hand, stammering back and asking. Having gone through so many things today, he now feels a bit less frightened and afraid of the mysterious whispering owner, but a bit more close, but now he finally knows the other party's true body, and it feels a little unbelievable. He only thought that he was mentioning himself in secret, and then who could resurrect his father and Junzi, who is the fox fairy, the gods and demons, but he never thought that it would turn out to be a kitchen knife. Yes, my name is Old Dao. As for my origin, I won't tell you now to avoid distraction. Moreover, you may not understand it. You only need to know, even if it is the so-called fairy demon first-rate in front of me, in fact, it's just a fart. He Zhen faintly screamed anyway. He had an introduction to the world with a big white ball in his mind. Although the world looks a bit wrong at the moment, one thing is certain, that is, this is just a Wuxia world. Regardless of whether it is high power or low power, it is not a world of immortals and supernatural beings, and he is not afraid of retribution if he wants to be addicted to his mouth. Li Gaodan listened blankly to He Zhen's bragging. He rubbed his eyes and made sure that what he was holding in his arms was just a rusty, bloody, and stained broken kitchen knife. This was himself a few years ago. The second-hand kitchen knife bought cheaply when going to the market is right. But then, Li Gaodan remembered something more important, and stammered nervously and asked, "Then you promised me, you will save my father and Junzi." "Oh, what I said before, naturally there will be no falsehoods." He Zhen, the soul of the kitchen knife, looked at Li Gaodan, and replied in an old-fashioned tone. The self-confidence in his tone made people have to believe. But what? Li Gaodan heard this turning point, his heart suddenly suspended. Although it is not that there is no such thing as the dead and the bones of medicine in this world, do you think it will be an easy task? Why should the old man help you? Li Gaodan was dumbfounded for a moment, put the pig iron chopper in his hand respectfully on the ground, reading www.yuyuganshu.com, then knelt on the ground, and slammed his head against the kitchen knife on the blue stone floor, making a bang and shouting in his mouth, "Please save my father and Junzi from Dao Lao, I will be a horse and a horse for Dao for the rest of my life. Depend on." Li Gaodan's sudden set of operations also scared the soul of the kitchen knife He Zhen a big jump. His first reaction was to observe the reactions of other people hiding in the ruined temple. Then He Zhen heaved a sigh of relief, and saw that all the people in this side hall looked at Li Gaodan, who was kowtow with pity, and some were sighing and saying, "Hey, another crazy," and so on. Observe carefully. Not one of the kitchen knives. I'll just say, passing through into a kitchen knife, no one would believe it if you take it out and say it. He Zhen muttered to himself, then turned his gaze back to Li Gaodan. "Well, what I promised, I will do it naturally, but to bring the dead back to life is to act against the sky and be impatient. You must sit down first. He Zhen emphasized in an extremely indifferent tone, but the old is present. Yes, as long as Dad and Junzi can be brought back to life, I will listen to everything. Li Gaodan said swearingly, while respectfully holding the broken chopper from the ground with both hands. He sat up cross-legged again. If you want to resurrect your father and Junzi, you have to find the treasure of the supreme martial arts first, but you can't count on me in this matter. After all, I'm just a chopper. He Zhen, the soul of the kitchen knife, rolled his eyes and said in a calm tone as much as possible. Linked his mission to Li Gaodan's wish. If you don't believe Li Gaodan, you still can't get the bait and don't work hard. As for another anti-confui mission of returning history to the right track. I just got the conversation now, so don't scare your children anymore. The treasure of the martial arts supreme. Li Gaodan repeated it with some difficulty. Obviously, whether it is Woolen supreme or treasure, or the whole coherent noun, they have never had any connection with him. Although a man has no dream of martial arts when Li Gaodan was young, he also liked to go to hear some legendary stories such as Jianghu storytelling, and he had also made some dreams of being a hero and heroic hero, but since his father after his leg was broken and the burden of the entire family fell on him, he put away all unrealistic ideas and began to run for survival. And the term the treasure of the martial arts supreme sounds very unusual, not to mention a mountain farmer like him, even an ordinary first-class master. I am afraid it is difficult to touch it. How can I become? You can't do it now, unless... He Zhen lightly talked about a turning point. Unless what? Li Dango asked eagerly. Unless you worship me as a teacher, then I will naturally teach you carefully, teach you martial arts, guide you to find treasures, but you need to know the so-called Master of Heaven and Earth, parents of me and Master of me. Being a teacher for one day, and a father for life, would you like to worship a kitchen knife as your teacher and swear to heaven to serve you all your life? He Zhen said to Li Gaodan in a very serious and solemn tone. Apprenticeship, this is also an out-and-out event in this era. The Master of Heaven and Earth is not just talking about it. Whether it is a literati or a warrior, betraying or disrespect of the teacher is no fake kind. Serious crimes, people who have made such mistakes will be looked down upon no matter where they go in the future. Li Gaodan only hesitated for a second, without hesitation, once again respectfully put the broken chopper on the ground, and then the whole person kneeled down like a Jinshan or Yuzhu, and knocked 9 heads every time. All of them left a red stamp on the floor, swearing loudly, the sky is above, and the thick soil is the testimony. Li Gaodan is willing to worship the sword as a teacher, respect as a father, and remain unchanged for life. If any a lie, the sky is thundered and thunderous, and it's hard to die. Okay. The old man will accept you as a disciple. Good boy, get up quickly, I'm just a kitchen knife, as long as you are sincere, don't forget these red tapes. He Zhen said in a pleased old tone. This comfort is not a pretense, He Zhen is indeed relieved a lot. Although I really know that this is just a martial arts world, there are no ghosts, but for people who really live in this world, they all believe that there are gods in the heavens and the earth, and they are very cautious about their oaths. After He Zhen agreed to accept the apprentice, he could only hear a strange wave in his mind, and the attribute panel also popped out in front of his eyes. Prestige from Li Gaodan plus 1000. The reputation with Li Gaodan has reached neutrality. Breakthrough in reputation, gained 1 talent point. Prestige from Li Gaodan plus 2000. The reputation with Li Gaodan has reached friendly. Breakthrough in reputation, gained 2 talent points. Prestige from Li Gaodan plus 2000. Holder, Li Gaodan, current reputation, friendly. The talent enhancement function has been turned on. A large swath of fluctuating information directly swiped the screen in He Zhen's mind. What the hell, the prestige is increased by the apprenticeship, and the prestige breakthrough also gives talent points. What is this talent point for? He Zhen was stunned. He was purely trying to control Li Gaodan better, so as to make himself a little safer more than letting Li Gaodan go wherever he goes. Don't forget to bring your own kitchen knife. During the apprenticeship session, he didn't expect that a lot of things that were completely unexpected to him would pop up in the follow-up. But fortunately, the soul power is still quite reliable. He really was puzzled by these new terms in his mind, and then he found the corresponding explanation in the depths of his memory, as if these memories have always existed, just being forgotten at the bottom of my mind. Well, just like the legend in some stories that when the dragon grows up to a certain age, it will instinctively learn high-level dragon language magic, He Zhen unlocked new functional modules, and naturally there will be corresponding the memory is added into the mind. Judging from the memory in my mind, talent points are the best catalyst for becoming stronger. They are extremely precious and rare resources. The way to obtain them will vary according to He Zhen's current main form, but the current chopper form, in other words, the main way to obtain it is recognition of this chopper. The recognition of the kitchen knife holder is an extremely important part of it. Li Gaodan's behavior of apprenticeship with the kitchen knife represents a high recognition of He Zhen, and his reputation directly jumped from cold to friendly. It is not difficult to understand that I have gained 3 talent points at one time. Where is this talent enhancement function? He Zhen hurriedly searched for the attribute panel that popped up, and then found it. On the very edge of the property panel, there was a simple stroke-like sign of a kitchen knife. The sign was still shining, and it seemed to say, click me, come click me. He Zhen shifted his gaze up and thought of Dot in his heart. A brand new panel popped out instantly. On the talent panel, there are 2 kitchen knives of the same style floating on the left and the right. The kitchen knife on the left is shining with golden light, and there are 4 words floating on it, the soldier of the holy path. Just looking at it. When you look at it, you can feel a sense of righteousness coming to your face, you can't help but feel respect, and feel guilty for the wrong things you have done. And the kitchen knife on the right is shrouded in a rolling black cloud. The letter "the soldier of the evil Dao" is written, and looking at this kitchen knife makes people feel a little hairy in their hearts, as if they have a sense of fear. Obviously, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com is making another choice. He Zhen pondered for a few seconds, then directly cast his gaze on the kitchen knife that was shrouded in black clouds. I choose the soldiers of the evil way. He Zhen made a decision from the bottom of his heart. There is nothing to hesitate in this choice. He Zhen asks himself that he is far from having such a high level of ideological awareness as the sacred way, but it is much easier to follow the evil way. Besides, he is a person who can do whatever it takes to win. Is like the root of a soldier of the holy path. He felt guilty for deceiving Li Gaodan just by looking at it. This alone completely violated his nature and habit. After He Zhen made a choice, the black cloud on the evil kitchen knife continued to surge and expand, and it immediately occupied the entire panel. After a while, it slowly dissipated, and He Zhen's talent panel, also the real, appeared. This talent panel is divided into 3 areas. The top of each section is marked with a few small characters. The uppermost plate reads "Demons have spirit," the uppermost plate reads "Indestructible," the rightmost plate at the top, it says "Man and Knife 1." Thanks to Book Friends 201809190630011646, Walkmansp for their tips. Thank you, Tangerine, and Book Friends for the monthly pass 201707241414514036. Because I have been pigeoning for a long time, I have not dared to say that I have published a book secretly, thinking that I should not be discovered by secretly publishing a book. The result was discovered early, manually split, and the signing status was changed yesterday midnight. I even received rewards and monthly tickets from Book Friends. Thank you very much. Of course, although I am very moved, but now I can't add more, because it's more difficult for me to save the manuscript than it is to save money. In short, I will try my best to update it. There are 3 talent trees occupying most of the space of the 3 talent panels. However, the talent trees of each panel are only visible on the first level. There are only one skill on the first level, and the next few the content of the layer is covered by black smoke. He Zhen carefully inspected the primary skills that belong to the 3 talent trees. The skill of the first level of the talent tree of Magic Knife with Spirit is called Demonstration. Demonstration allows you to feel and guide the emotions of the holder, slightly improving the persuasive effect. The skill of the first level of the talent tree of Invincible Destruction is called Quenching Body. Quenched iron body absorbs the same material, pig iron, as the main body of the current weapon, which can slowly restore durability. The skill on the first level of the talent tree of Man and Sword 1 is called Lifeless Wisdom. Lifeless Wisdom permanently reduce the remaining life of the holder by 10%, increase the roots and understanding by 100%, and increase the lifespan speed by 500% when practicing martial arts. I am worthy of a bad way. He Zhen looked at these 3 skills, which were just the most basic skills. Among them, the hardened iron and forging body is quite satisfactory, while the bewitching people's heart seems a bit evil, and the final lifeless wisdom is simply. Use 2 talent points first, of which 1 point will be invested in demonstration, and 1 point will be invested in lifeless wisdom. He really made a decision quickly. There is nothing to say about bewitching people's hearts. He is now a poor and helpless chopper. His only power of action is on Li Gaodan. Strengthening the understanding and control of Li Gaodan is the first priority. The role of lifeless wisdom is even more prominent, which is directly related to how strong He Zhen's only action is. Li Gaodan, although it has a negative effect on lifespan reduction, Li Gaodan is still very young now. I want to come. It shouldn't be a big problem. As for hardening iron body, it is not that this skill is not important, but the priority is not that high in relative terms. As long as it is not used to chop stones, it must be 4/7 durability. Therefore, He Zhen would rather not tap this skill first, and leave 1 point of talent for a standby. Wait and see. I think it must be that the second level of talent is more powerful. As He Zhen's heart moved, the 2 talent points disappeared, and the 2 skills of demonstration and lifeless wisdom on the talent tree were lighted up, but the second level on the 2 talent trees the skills are still shrouded in black smoke. What's the matter? How can I unlock the second layer of talent? He Zhen stared hard at the black smoke. I saw a row of small characters emerge. You need to invest a total of 5 talent points on the first layer of talent before it can be unlocked. Wait, the first level skills of these 3 talent trees add up, and there are only 3 in total. How to invest 5 talent points? Isn't it? He Zhen pretended to scratch his own hair, and thought of the only possibility: these talent skills can be enhanced and upgraded. Then, do you want to reinforce lifeless wisdom again? He Zhen thought. Considering that Li Gaodan has just been apprenticed to him, and he has invested 1 point of talent to bewitching people's hearts, the current control should be sufficient, so it is more important to find ways to improve Li Gaodan's combat effectiveness. The thing this can also make Li Gaodan more convinced of himself. Continue to strengthen the lifeless wisdom. He Zhen tried to give orders from the bottom of his heart. Unexpectedly, the last 1 point of talent disappeared, and the lighted lifeless wisdom icon began to glow, which can be strengthened repeatedly. After a few seconds, the light of the lifeless wisdom icon disappeared, and a new skill description was revealed. Lifeless Wisdom, Level 2, permanently reduce the remaining life of the holder by 20%, increase the roots and understanding by 500%, and increase the lifespan speed to 5000% when practicing martial arts. Damn, what kind of coefficient improvement is this in the end? He Zhen looked at the brand new level 2 Wisdom of Lifelessness and was also stunned. The reduced remaining lifespan has doubled from 10% to 20%, while the increase in roots and perception has directly doubled from 100% to 500%. The most exaggerated thing is that when practicing martial arts, the speed of life elapsed jumped from 500% to 5000%, which was a 10 times increase. Is this a magical skill or? He really wanted to find out about Li Gaodan, but suddenly felt a complex feeling of fear, and worry. It came from Li Gaodan. This is the function of deceiving people's hearts. Just think of the holder, and he can vaguely sense the holder's emotions. He Zhen looked at Li Gaodan. Well, even without the help of deceptively, he would have discovered this. Li Gaodan was shrinking in the corner, holding a kitchen knife, and staring outside. I don't know what I was thinking, but his face was obviously afraid and worried. Are you worried that I will hurt him? Well, after all, how can a talking chopper think it's not normal? He really thought about it, and tried his best to speak to Li Gaodan in an old and kind voice. My child, what are you thinking about? Old knife. Li Gaodan came back to his senses abruptly, and whispered with some worry, I saw that there were arrests and officers and soldiers walking outside the temple several times. In the past, there would be no officials in such places. I am afraid that I will kill them. About the officers and soldiers. He Zhen couldn't help rolling his eyes, and comforted, the people in the county are panicking now. It would be a strange thing if there are no trappers and soldiers on the street. You should not scare yourself. Think about who saw the panic at the time. Did you kill? Just relax, no one knows who killed the squad officer. In fact, there are still many problems with He Zhen's comfort. For example, no one knows who killed the team officer. At that time, the team officer was a small food stall that entered with his companions. Although the other comrades were scared first. I ran away, but may not have looked back, and there were so many defeated soldiers passing by the roadside, saying that no one saw it at all. It was obviously impossible for Yu to read www.yuyuganshu.com. It was because the situation was urgent at the time. People care about it. Perhaps Li Gaodan didn't think deeply, and it's even more likely that He Zhen's new talent confuses people's hearts. In short, under He Zhen's comfort and guidance, Li Gaodan was obviously more calm. He thought about it, and then moved towards He Zhen asked, Old Dao, what should we do next? It's getting late today, so you can rest early. From tomorrow, I will teach you martial arts, and then I will inquire about the martial arts supreme treasure and the murderer who killed your Junzi family in the city. He Zhen said lightly. Li Gaodan was overjoyed at first, and then he showed some hesitation on his face, and asked in a low voice, Old Dao, since we are looking for the treasure to save my father and Junzi, then I will look for it. What did the murderer who killed Junzi do? You don't want to take revenge or kill those people. He Zhenkai said. If both my father and Junzi can survive, don't kill them. I killed someone today, and now I think of it, my hands and feet are still a little weak. In case the government finds out. Li Gaodan replied in a low voice. He Zhen frowned tightly. To tell the truth, it's not his business to find the enemy who killed Junzi. He was so eager to find the treasure of martial arts supreme, so he could finish the task early and get away from this kitchen knife. But it was in order to accomplish this ultimate goal that he tried his best to make Li Gaodan trust him. It was also out of this idea to help Junzi get revenge, but in front of him, Li Gaodan's weakness was beyond his imagination. It doesn't seem to be able to complete the task. Thank you very kind Junmo for your reward. Thank you for the monthly pass sliding in the book. Who thinks that Li Gaodan doesn't want to take revenge? Took a step back and said, this time whether to help Junzi in revenge is a trivial matter. What really makes He Zhen feel a little unreliable is the problem of Li Gaodan's mindness. Over the past 10 years, the humble status and heavy labor at the bottom level have completely wiped out Li Gaodan's edges and temperament. He has been distorted by this feudal society into a cowardly maggot. Even if his father was killed on the spot, he was exploded. But afterwards he will fall into deep fear. A person like this wants to use his toes to compete with the heroes of the world, to the supreme treasure that is extremely difficult to know with his toes, and finally to promote the general trend of the world and set things right. This is simply a fantasy. After all, It doesn't matter if martial arts is not good. You can practice it with a longevity, but if you are too cautious and bad, it will be very troublesome. But then again, this is actually just a child who has just turned 16 years old. No matter how precocious he is still in adolescence. The world outlook on life, and values should not be fully formed. Is there any way to do it? How about training and reforming? He Zhen shrank in the kitchen knife, his brain searched frantically, looking back at the rebellious moments he had along the way when he was a teenager. Before crossing, he had never studied professional psychology, nor had he played anything like SM or PUA. He knew almost nothing about training, even though he had taken the exam. Teacher's qualification certificate, but what we learn is also how to guide a child on the right path. Yes. He Zhen's eyes brightened. Based on his experience in his youth, he found some useful things, but the times are different after all. If there is any effect, you still have to try first. Dogden, do you want to hear some stories about the heroes of the rivers and lakes? He Zhen coughed twice and asked Li Gaodan. A story about the heroes of the rivers and lakes? I want to hear. Li Gaodan was shrinking in the corner and couldn't sleep. Hearing Dao Lao make such a sound, he nodded and agreed. There is no entertainment in this era. The most common ones are storytelling and gambling. What's more, for Li Gaodan, he is usually too busy to cook and clean. How can there be time to listen to stories about storytelling? Now that the mysterious knife always wants to tell a story, how could he not want to listen? Okay, let's start, and close your eyes well. The old knife's voice rang in Li Gaodan's ears, and then, in Li Gaodan's eyes, scenes of real images as if they were seen with his own eyes, suddenly appeared like a counterattack in a snack shop. It's the same for a squad officer. This is how He Zhen uses the ability of spiritual communication to project what he thinks and recalls into Li Gaodan's mind, a bit like intubation or virtual VR. The first scene that appeared in Li Gaodan's mind was that several children about his size were bullied by a group of fierce people and threatened to pay protection fees. Li Gaodan couldn't help but remember that he and his father started the establishment. The small food shop in the country clearly earns only enough money to maintain the food and clothing of the family, but it also has to face waves of government officials who come to collect taxes and local rogues who ask for safety money. Therefore, even if the hairstyles and clothing of these people in the images in their minds are extremely weird, they quickly made Li Gaodan feel empathetic, and empathetic after all, they are people from the rivers and lakes. This first story is called Young and Dangerous People in the Rivers and Lakes. A line of bright red captions that Li Gaodan didn't recognize appeared in the video. He Zhen, soul of the kitchen knife, also gave a voiceover commentary in a timely manner. That's right. What the soul of the kitchen knife really played for Li Gaodan in his mind was the Young and Dangerous series of movies. When He Zhen was still a teenager, he was often poisoned by such underworld movies. After watching it, he thought about having a hong seeing with a few classmates all day. The once dream was to become the support of the junior high school. Son, of course, in the end this dream was shattered under the palm of the head teacher and his father. But this is enough to explain the influence that this series of films can have on teenagers in the rebellious period. Therefore, He Zhen thought of taking it out immediately in the future and playing it to Li Gaodan to try the water. As for the completeness of the movie, since he became a kitchen knife, He Zhen has a very good memory. No matter how small things in his past life, he has become extremely clear and profound. Where did Li Gaodan experience activities like watching movies, and it's still more real than virtual VR? In addition, the subject matter is so profound, I just look at it intently and motionless, forgetting my own hunger and cold. In this way, in this small ruined temple in Wu County, Li Gaodan ushered in the baptism of his soul for the first time, the second reshaping of his outlook on life and values, inspired by the hong-seeing spirit of daring to fight. It even dilutes the sadness caused by the killing of his father and childhood sweetheart fiancé. Happy time always flies quickly, and one night has passed. Right or wrong is difficult to decide, which one has the right to decide justice is too old. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Even if righteousness is too old, the world is not there, no matter what excuses. As Li Gaodan didn't understand clearly, but only felt that the spirited Cantonese young and dangerous theme song ended, the image in his mind completely disappeared. Dogden, it's dawn, the old man should teach you martial arts. The old and powerful voice of the knife sounded in Li Gaodan's ear. Li Gaodan stayed up all night and watched 3 movies in one breath. He Zhen gave him The Young and Dangerous Man in the Rivers and Lakes, The Young and Dangerous Dragon Crossing the River, and The Hand of the Young and Dangerous Boy Cover the Sky. Although Li Gaodan had been watching all night, he didn't feel sleepy at all. He just felt that he was still in the mood. He had never thought that Jianghe would be so wonderful, so happy and enmity, all of which were deeply attracted. Although there are some blushing fragments that make him quite embarrassed. Yes. Li Gaodan rubbed his eyes, got up from the ground, carrying a kitchen knife, walked out of the side hall, and came to the backyard of the ruined temple. It was 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and the sky was bright. The overgrown backyard was empty, but it was a good place to practice martial arts. Old sword, how should I practice? Before Li Gaodan finished asking questions, another image of a man practicing with a knife was reflected in his mind, and the voice of the old knife was also transmitted at the same time. The sword technique that the old man teaches you now is called sweeping 1,000 army. It is a martial art in the army of the Dechang dynasty. The effect can be achieved by training, and thousands of troops can be changed, and you can come and go freely in the battlefield. You should study it first. Thank you for the reward of lemon essence on the lemon tree.